Now, what have you been working on in regards to gun control?
There was a lot of gun issues in this legislature. I'll go back to the end of February, early March. Once a year, all the attorneys general, all 50 of us get together, unless somebody's in trial or has something going on. For the most part, it's 40 to 50 of us. Get together in Washington, D.C. We've developed somewhat of a unique relationship with Vice President Biden. His son, Beau Biden, is the Attorney General of Delaware. I consider him a friend. And so the Vice President has met with us quite often. In fact, he had us to his home at the Naval Base, and we had an opportunity to do that. But this year, he came to us to strictly address gun control. And you picture the setting where the Vice President's at the podium, and there's 50 Attorneys General around the table, including his son at one end, and also George Jetson, the Attorney General of Connecticut, that just went through that horrible incident at the elementary school, and laid out essentially the President's vision for gun control. Certainly, I am a Second Amendment Attorney General. I have an A rating from the NRA. I mean, I understand public safety, but I also appreciate the right to bear arms. And so I'm one of those Attorney Generals that is watching very closely as how this is unfolding, at least with the 23 executive orders that were issued, along with some of the legislation that the Vice President told us was coming, and part of it is coming, part of it isn't. Some of what he talked to us, like universal background checks. On its face, maybe that doesn't sound all that bad, but what does that mean about private sales? For instance, my grandfather's shotgun was given to my dad gave it to me, I'm giving it to my son. Do I need to have a background for all that? Is that a wise use of federal resources to do that background? I just bought my son a youth 20-gauge shotgun in Cabela's. Is that considered a straw purchase? I mean, I don't ever intend that gun to be mine. It's his gun. But those things are questions that need to be answered on the universal background checks. Similarly, he talked to us about needing 30,000 additional police officers. I was asked by a reporter in Rapid, well, wouldn't an Attorney General obviously support that? And I said, well, not necessarily. Until I know the details. Details such as who's paying for it. Is this going to be an unfunded federal mandate that we, as a state that have to have a balanced budget, are going to have to do certain things? I look back, like this year, I proposed one additional DCI agent under the Attorney General to be in the Northern Hills because of the oil boom and the rise in crime that we've seen. But with that proposal, I showed the justification that we've had an increase of 2 to 3 times more crime, that rapes increased over the year from 1 to 12. I showed them what it was going to cost, and so I justified it and showed the cost. We don't know what the President's plan is with that yet. But a lot of good aspects of it too. He talked about having emergency managers be more in the loop and some of those responsibilities. So overall, that was the setting of gun control. So then when I returned, we dealt with gun control in the legislature on several different bills. One of the bills was Senate Bill 207, which was really, it did two things. It emphasized the importance in South Dakota to the Second Amendment, that we respect individual and states' rights when it comes to the Second Amendment and the right to self-defense. And then it had a Section 2 that was put in on the House side that said, and we further request the Attorney General or order the Attorney General to be vigilant in defending the Second Amendment. I testified in favor of those two concepts on the Senate side. It passed overwhelmingly. It went to the House side and it got jammed up, or it got stopped. The concerns were really not, people weren't supporting the Second Amendment. It was felt, instead of being a legislative finding, it should have been a resolution, was the discussion. And similarly, there was the belief that the Attorney General is going to be vigilant anyhow, and so there was a question of whether there was a need to have it. So that was one of the bills that went through. Of course, the Sentinel bill, the school Sentinel bill that went through, has an aspect that involves the Attorney General. In a nutshell, what the Sentinel bill is, it allows a school district, if they believe that it would be in their best interest and safety, the school board can vote to have certain individuals tied to the school district trained and carry a gun. Protections were put in there, so you have initially the school board can vote on that, but that can be referred back to the school district community for a vote of the people. The other thing it would require is the sheriff of the community to okay the individual or okay the process. And then the final protection is the Attorney General would train whoever the sentinel is. And right now, I just met, in fact, yesterday on how that's going to look. And right now, it's still in its early stages, but we have a law enforcement training commission, and what I anticipate proposing to them is a 2-week training if anybody were to go through that, and that would be a 1 week of firearms training where the individual would shoot about 1,600 rounds, similar to what a law enforcement officer being certified would do, and then would take a week-long course of use of force and simulation to try to train when it would be appropriate. The legislature did not appropriate any money for that training, so it will be left up to either the individual seeking the training or the school district. Those were the main bills. The other one dealt with psychological, mental illness type information. I think everybody that was talking about it realized that you don't want to put guns in the hands of somebody that has been determined, mentally unstable. The challenge in South Dakota is we don't have a database with that information. All 66 counties have that separate. And so at one point the legislature was looking at the Attorney General having such database. I'm open to that. I'm not sure the Attorney General is the right place for that. Perhaps one of the other health type agencies might be, but I mean certainly if it helps protect the public, I'm willing to do that, and I indicated that to the legislature. But right now that's the challenge. It's a continuing discussion in South Dakota. The majority of states have some form of database dealing with mental illness adjudications, and we don't. And I think that discussion needs to continue.
Now, with the Sentinel bill, what challenges does that possess to you?
Certainly, right now the challenges deal with, because we have such close relationships with the sheriff, assisting the sheriff to the extent they need anything on any of the background information, and then the training. The challenges of the training are to make it cost effective and efficient. When you talk about 1,600 rounds of ammo, I mean there's a cost of about $900 associated with that, depending upon whether it's going to be a 40 cal or a 9mm or what have you. So there's going to be a cost of in that realm of $1,000 to $2,000, and so we need to make that cost effective and efficient and as productive as we can. And I say we because the state is run by a law enforcement training commission. Some of the individuals are appointed by statute. Some of the individuals are appointed by me as Attorney General. We'll make recommendations to them, and then we'll rely upon them. And they're all tied to law enforcement. For instance, it's the head of the FBI. It's the head of the Highway Patrol. It's the head of the DCI. Chief Allender out of Sioux Falls. So we have... or Chief Barthel, sorry. We have individuals that are tied to law enforcement helping make those decisions for what the training curriculum should look like.
When I was talking to local law enforcement about the Sentinel bill, there was some confusion. One of them was, well, if the Yankton School District decided they want a Sentinel, would they need the sheriff or the police or both?
Sheriff.
It'd be the sheriff, okay.
So what would happen, Yankton, as an example? First of all, the school board would have to okay it. So if the school board okayed it, then the community would decide whether they support that decision or not. And if they potentially don't, then it would be a referred measure. In other words, they would refer that decision to the vote of the people. So that's a possible safeguard. Once that's done, then the sheriff has to address it, through the background and other things. And then once the sheriff does that, then the Attorney General would do the training.
Does the sheriff then have the power to say, no, I don't think this is a good idea?
Pretty broad discretion.
Okay.
One other thing that I guess that was the Attorney General's involvement is the Attorney General was concerned that we didn't want sheriff to get sued over the issue, nor did we want to get sued, the state, over the training, and so there is a waiver of liability type provision tied to the bill to protect sheriffs. The school districts did not want that. They pretty much overwhelmingly did not support the Sentinel bill, and so they did not want that liability protection, and so they were not included on that.
Back to the death penalty issue, I know the ACLU has a lawsuit in progress right now, and
On the Donald Moore case, they continue to, they continue to litigate the Donald Moore case in federal court.
And as part of that, you were being asked, I think, to provide some information about the supplier or maker of the drugs, and you're really concerned about identifying those. And I was just curious why that's such an important issue to you.
Right now, the identity of the local pharmacist and the identity of the manufacturer is protected by a federal court order and by a new statute that was put in place this year. I went to the legislature and asked them to have that. So there's the two protections. There's the state statute and there's the federal court order. We've seen nationally a whole lot of pressure and harassment of individuals tied to either supplying, i.e. the pharmacists or the manufacturers of chemicals. And so in fact, the manufacturer that originally provided South Dakota sodium thipenthol, we did not use that in either the Moeller or the Robert case, but that we had it. Some of these special interest organizations actually sued that manufacturer for providing South Dakota just the drug. And my position as Attorney General has been that whether or not the death penalty is legal in South Dakota is a decision for the South Dakota legislature and the governor. I mean, I do support the death penalty in very limited circumstances like we have, and I think South Dakota uses it very sparingly. But that's for the legislature to decide, not for some independent interest group to circumvent the legislative process and the governor by harassing or potentially injuring a pharmacist that simply compounds a chemical or a manufacturer that simply provides a chemical. And so that's what's going on here, is these independent interest groups are seeking to abolish the death penalty through, in my mind, inappropriate means. And there's no reason the ACLU needs to know the name of the local pharmacist that compounded the chemicals used in Donald Moeller. It obviously worked. Part of what they claimed in the legislative session is the Attorney General was trying to hide things. And I think everybody knows in South Dakota that the public announcement of the Moeller execution was made, that the media was invited to it. There were 2 members of the media that were present just like I was, and that this wasn't done behind closed doors, so to speak. And so the legislature overwhelmingly supported the Attorney General's legislation because it was reasonable and it makes sense.